The sweetest spot on Maple Lane. The morning sun, still soft and hazy, cast a gentle glow over the quiet streets of Maple Lane. For Sarah, this time of day was a sacred ritual. Clad in her worn gardening gloves, she moved with practiced grace among the hydrangeas and petunias, each movement a silent conversation with the earth. Her home was modest, a 2-story farmhouse with a porch swing that had seen better days, but her garden was a living testament to a love that had outlasted grief. At the heart of it all stood the lemon tree. It was a small, vibrant thing, its leaves a deep, glossy green, and its branches heavy with fruit. Some lemons were still pale and hard, others a brilliant sun-kissed yellow, their skins pitted and fragrant. For Sarah, the scent alone was a kind of magic, a sharp, clean perfume that carried her back in time. This tree was no ordinary plant. It was a gift from her mother, planted in this very soil just weeks before she passed. "This tree will give you a little bit of sunshine, always," her mother had whispered, her voice frail but full of a lasting warmth. And it had. Each plump, citrusy sphere held a memory of her mother's laugh, of their shared secrets, of the simple joy of a life lived with a quiet heart. Just beyond the picket fence, the world seemed to shift. Brenda, Sarah's next-door neighbor, lived in a sprawling modern mansion that towered over the other houses. Brenda's garden was a meticulously manicured landscape of perfect symmetrical hedges and exotic flowers, with names Sarah couldn't pronounce. There was no life there, no story, just a display of wealth. Brenda often stood on her immaculate patio, a diamond-studded watch glinting on her wrist, and watched Sarah. She'd offer a saccharine smile that never reached her eyes, or worse, a thinly veiled comment about the wild look of Sarah's garden. "Such a shame," Brenda had once remarked from across the street, her voice carrying on the gentle breeze. "All that effort, and for what? It's not exactly going to win any." Wide, her eyes scanning Sarah's perfectly respectable, off-the-rack blouse as if it were a costume. "I just picked up a little something from Paris last month. Such darling boutiques there, you know." Brenda would then hold up a garment bag, the designer logo glaring like a trophy. It was always something like that, not a direct insult, but a constant, gentle push to remind Sarah of their supposed difference in station. Sarah's vintage porcelain teacups were charming, if a bit old. Her reliable sedan was cute for running errands, not like our new German import. Brenda never missed an opportunity to point out her own perceived superiority, making every small choice Sarah had ever made feel like a mistake. The most stinging attacks were the whispers. Brenda was a social hub of the neighborhood, and she controlled the narrative with the precision of a master puppeteer. Sarah heard the stories secondhand, filtered through the awkward pity of other neighbors. "Brenda says Sarah's husband left her because she was too quiet." Or, "Brenda heard Sarah's family used to live in a trailer park. Can you believe it?" These rumors were baseless and cruel, but they stuck, making Sarah feel like a permanent outsider in a community she had called home for years. The tension finally reached a boiling point with the annual neighborhood summer party. This was the highlight of the social calendar on Maple Lane, an event Brenda hosted with a fierce pride. Invitations were sent out weeks in advance, arriving in thick, cream-colored envelopes. On a Tuesday morning, Sarah watched from her window as a steady parade of neighbors, one by one, checked their mailboxes and smiled as they pulled out the pristine white envelopes. all of them except her. That evening, as the music drifted from Brenda's backyard and the scent of grilled steak filled the air, Sarah sat on her porch swing, a cold glass of lemonade in her hand. She could see the glittering string lights and hear the roar of laughter. She knew the party wasn't for her, but the deliberate exclusion, the calculated lack of an invitation was a dagger to her heart. It wasn't just a party. It was a public. The world fell away. The scent of citrus and fresh-turned soil pulled her back in time, back to a kitchen filled with sunshine and the easy warmth of her mother's presence. She was 12 years old, perched on a stool, watching her mother. Her mother's hands, so gentle and sure, methodically zested the lemons and squeezed their tart juice into a bowl. "Every good recipe, sweet pea," her mother had said. Her voice, like soft music, starts with the heart. It's not about the ingredients, it's about the love you put into it. They had spent the entire day making lemon curd, filling small glass jars to give to neighbors. Her mother had hummed a soft, wordless tune as she worked, a melody that Sarah had never forgotten. That memory was not just a picture in her mind. It was a feeling that lived in the scent of the lemons, the feel of the cool ceramic bowl, the taste of the first spoonful of perfect curd. The lemon tree was the last living piece of that memory. It wasn't just a plant. It was a physical connection to the woman who had taught her to find joy in simple things and to value kindness over anything else. As Sarah stood there, a sudden, powerful clarity washed over her. The party next door, the whispers, the snide remarks, it was all noise. The true value was in the quiet, in the deep-seated legacy of love and compassion that Brenda, with all her wealth and all her social power, could never possess. Sarah touched the rough bark of the tree, feeling the steady strength of its trunk. This tree had seen her through a grief so profound it had nearly broken her. It had been her silent confidant, her unwavering source of hope. And tonight, as the laughter next door grew louder, Sarah realized the fight wasn't about being invited to a party or fitting in. It was about protecting the last piece of her mother's light in the world. And in her heart, she knew she would do whatever it took to keep that light from ever going out. The unseen line is crossed. The quiet truce between Sarah's simple life and Brenda's grand one was a fragile thing, and Brenda was growing tired of the peace, voice loud and imperious. As the trimmer buzzed away, Sarah watched in growing horror as the man began cutting well beyond the property line. He was systematically hacking away at the climbing vines that had wound their way up Sarah's old shed, their soft green leaves now falling in the sad, severed heap on the grass. "Oops!" Brenda called out, her voice dripping with mock apology as she met Sarah's stare. "Tell your gardener to be more careful next time, dear. My team has very high standards, you know." Sarah's hands tightened into fists. She walked to the fence, her voice low but firm. "Brenda, that's my property. You need to tell him to stop." Brenda merely laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, calm down. It's just a few vines. It needed a trim anyway. Your whole yard is so unkempt." The words were a direct hit, aimed not just at the vines, but at Sarah herself. Brenda was no longer content with just belittling her. She was actively trying to dismantle the things that brought Sarah joy. The incident wasn't about a broken fence or a few cut vines. It was about the deliberate destruction of beauty, of peace, and of a boundary that should have been sacred. As Sarah stood there, looking at the mess left behind, she knew Brenda had finally gone too far. The game had just become a war. The morning began like any other. With the promise of soft light and new growth, Sarah walked into her garden, a gentle smile on her face, but it dissolved into a gasp of horror. A foul, acrid smell hung in the air, a chemical stench that assaulted her senses and made her stomach churn. It was the scent of treachery. Her gaze fell on the lemon tree. It wasn't the vibrant green that greeted her every morning, but a sickening pale yellow. The leaves were shriveled and curling at the edges, and the ripe lemons hung from the branches with a wilted, lifeless weight. At the base of the trunk, the soil was a strange, discolored white, as if something had been poured there to poison the earth itself. She ran to it, kneeling on the ground with trembling hands, and brushed the soil away. The roots of her precious tree were already turning black. Slit, bottomless jealousy had seen it not as a source of life, but as an insult. The destruction of the tree was a declaration of war, a message sent with a cruelty so cold and calculated, it left Sarah breathless. She stood for a long time, looking at the dying tree. The tears had finally come, streaming down her face and leaving tracks on her dust-covered cheeks. The pain was more profound than the day her rose bush was broken, deeper than the sting of Brenda's gossip. It was the pain of a betrayal so complete that it felt like a part of her own soul was being torn away. And in that moment, as the stench of the poison filled her lungs, Sarah realized she could no longer hide. The quiet life she had so fiercely protected was over. Now a different kind of life had to begin. The tears that had fallen onto the poisoned soil of her garden were a last remnant of Sarah's grief. She stood up, wiped her face, and felt a cold, hard resolve settle in her heart. She would not cry again. Crying was for the defeated, and in this war she would not lose. The impulse to march over to Brenda's towering mansion and scream, to demand an explanation, was powerful. She pictured herself, enraged, pointing a trembling finger at the bottle half buried in the hedge. But she held herself back. She knew what would happen. Brenda would feign innocence, her eyes wide with mock surprise. She'd call Sarah hysterical and unstable, and in the end, it would be Sarah who looked unhinged, while Brenda, with her flawless exterior, remained untouched. No, that was not the way. Sarah looked at her hands, the hands that had tended this garden for years, that had nourished a tree born of love. Now they were stained with the dust of betrayal. She realized that Brenda's poison had not just killed a tree. It had killed the part of Sarah that had always sought peace and compromise. A new path, one of quiet vengeance, was beginning to form in her mind. She walked into her kitchen. The air, still thick with the chemicals, was still there, but it was now a sharp, focused energy. The game was no longer about a garden. It was about justice, about legacy, and about the quiet power of a woman who had finally realized that to win, she couldn't just stand her ground. She had to build an empire on it. Time, planting the seeds of success. The morning after the poison attack, the air in Sarah's kitchen was not one of despair, but of determined purpose. She set to work with a methodical calm that belied the storm raging inside her. The first step was to retrieve the last of her dying tree's harvest. The lemons, though their leaves were shriveled, were still fragrant and full of life. Sarah picked each one, their bright yellow color a defiant contrast to the graying foliage of the tree. They felt like tiny, sunlit promises in her palm. She set up her workspace on the kitchen island. No longer was this just a place for cooking. It was becoming a workshop of revenge. She retrieved her mother's old cookbook, the pages brittle and stained with age, and turned to the familiar recipe for lemon curd. It wasn't just about following directions. It was about honoring a tradition. As she zested and squeezed, she felt a connection to her past, a powerful energy that fueled her every move. But this time, the recipe was for more than just a jar of memories. It was the foundation of a business. Sarah spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, not just cooking, but planning. She used her old digital camera to take photos of the curd, arranging the jars just so, with a few fresh lemon leaves for a pop of green. She focused on the light, on the texture, on the beautiful simplicity of the food itself. Next, she turned to her computer. With a hesitant but firm hand, she began creating an online store. She named it Maple Lane Citrus, a simple, honest name that felt like home. She wrote a short description for each product, infusing it with a sense of place and personal history. Her first post on social media wasn't just a promotion, it was a story. Sarah uploaded a photo of her hands holding a perfectly ripe lemon, tending to her new venture with the same careful hands she'd used for her garden. She poured her love into every jar, tying each one with a simple twine bow. Brenda, of course, was the first to notice the change. From her elevated vantage point on her patio, she could see Sarah's constant comings and goings, the small packages stacked by the front door for the mail carrier. One afternoon, she made her way over, her movements deliberate and theatrical. "Oh, Sarah," Brenda cooed, her voice dripping with faux curiosity. "What on earth are you up to? I saw the mailman hauling a whole box away. Are you finally selling some of that old stuff from your garage?" Sarah held up a small jar of the lemon curd, its golden contents gleaming in the sunlight. "It's homemade lemon curd. I've started a small business online." Brenda's perfect manicured eyebrows shot up. She let out a sharp, amused little laugh that was more of a scoff. "A business? Oh, darling, that's just precious. A little kitchen hobby. My personal chef gets our citrus flown in from Italy, you know. But good for you. It's so sweet that you're keeping busy." The words were a calculated dismissal, a verbal pat on the head meant to make Sarah feel small. Brenda's smile was a weapon, conveying not a hint of genuine warmth. She spun on her heel and walked away, her laughter echoing in the quiet afternoon. But Sarah didn't flinch. She simply looked down at the jar in her hand. Brenda saw a hobby. Sarah saw a burgeoning legacy. She knew that Brenda, in her self-absorbed world, couldn't grasp the power of something made with love and a story. She didn't understand that in a world of mass-produced goods, authenticity was a currency of its own. As Brenda's laughter faded, a determined calm settled over Sarah. The mockery was just more fuel for her fire. She had started a small spark, resting in the palm of her hand, framed by the empty skeletal branches of the tree behind it. The accompanying text was a testament to resilience. "This isn't just about making jam. It's about not letting someone else's bitterness kill your light." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The post resonated with people who had faced their own quiet battles and silent betrayals. Comments poured in, messages of support, shared stories of loss and resilience, and an outpouring of compassion for the woman whose small, brave act had turned a tragedy into an inspiration. The story was shared thousands of times in a matter of hours. Sarah's phone began to buzz with a relentless urgency. Orders came in faster than she could pack them. What began as a local hobby had become a viral sensation. She had given her community not just a product, but a story of hope. Brenda had tried to kill something beautiful, and in doing so, had unwittingly given it the fuel it needed to blossom in a way she could have never imagined. The dying tree was no longer just a symbol of loss. It was a beacon of defiant hope, all because Sarah had dared to share her truth. The neighbor's scorn. The wifelif as a point, had been ready to help the closer to pack on the school. Sentenced, scorned. The wildfire of Sarah's success burned right through Brenda's manicured world. Brenda, accustomed to being the star of her own show, watched with seething disbelief as her quiet, unassuming neighbor became a local sensation. The comments on Sarah's viral post were like daggers to Brenda's ego. Brenda seems to have given up on her kitchen hobby. I guess I won't be getting any fancy lemon curd from France. Brenda's first reaction was pure, unfiltered rage. She knew she couldn't openly confess to her crime, but she was a master of manipulation. She created a fake online account, Concerned Neighbor, and began leaving scathing one-star reviews on Sarah's online shop. She complained about delayed shipping, sour-tasting jam, and unprofessional packaging. She tried to ignite a smear campaign in the neighborhood, subtly hinting that Sarah was a fraud, and her sentimental story was nothing more than a marketing ploy. One afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up and praised for her delicious products. They saw Brenda's anonymous reviews for exactly what they were: sour grapes. Every time Brenda tried to hurt Sarah, she only made her look more sympathetic and her story more powerful. Sarah realized that Brenda's fury wasn't a problem. It was part of her own marketing campaign, and Brenda, completely consumed by her own jealousy, was her best, most effective accomplice. The interview and the reveal. The day of the interview dawned bright and clear, but Sarah's stomach was a nest of butterflies. A local news station had picked up her viral story, and a reporter named Jessica was coming to film a segment for the evening news. Sarah had cleaned and prepared, but she knew the heart of the story wasn't her house, but the dying tree that stood in the yard. Jessica and her cameraman were professional and kind. They started the interview on Sarah's porch, asking about the business and the unexpected flood of support. But then Jessica turned the conversation to the source of it all. Your story has really resonated with people, Sarah. This whole business was born from a place of resilience, wasn't it? Can you tell us more about what happened to the tree? Sarah looked directly into the camera. She spoke with a calm, steady voice, her words simple and honest. She described the deep sentimental value of the lemon tree, a tangible link to her mother. She spoke of its sudden, mysterious death and of the pain she had felt standing over its poisoned roots. I don't know why someone would do something so cruel, she said, her voice catching slightly. But I realized that I couldn't let their bitterness win. I couldn't let their anger kill my joy. Just then, the cameraman panned across the yard, capturing the image of the wilted, heartbreakingly bare branches of the tree. As the camera lingered on the tragic sight, it subtly continued its sweep, and for a fleeting moment, it caught the window of Brenda's mansion. There, half hidden behind a drawn curtain, stood a figure. It was Brenda, her face a mask of furious, unblinking hatred, her mouth twisted in a sneer. She had been watching the entire interview, believing herself to be safely out of sight. Down. All because a quiet woman had decided to tell her truth. The day after the news story aired, Brenda's world collapsed. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect life crumbled under the weight of her own cruelty. Anonymous packages began arriving on her doorstep, not with threats, but with small, single-stemmed lemon blossoms, a quiet yet relentless act of defiance from the community. People in the neighborhood no longer offered their saccharine smiles. They simply looked away, their silence a powerful judgment. The perfect manicured hedges and immaculate lawn now felt like a cage, trapping Brenda in the world of her own making. She had won every small skirmish, but had lost the war for her reputation. For Sarah, the world opened up. She received orders from across the country, each one accompanied by a message of support and admiration for her strength. She hired help, a young, kind woman from the neighborhood, to assist with the growing demand. Soon, the small business she had started in her kitchen had outgrown her home. With the profits, she signed a lease on the small storefront downtown, a place with a little window display and the sign that read, "Maple Lane Citrus, a taste of resilience." One afternoon, Sarah stood in her garden, a small shovel in her hand. Beside her, a young, vibrant lemon tree sapling sat in a pot, its leaves a promise of future growth. She knelt at the base of the old withered tree, a monument to a pain she had now overcome. It was time to let go of the old and embrace the new. She carefully dug a hole and placed the sapling in the very spot where her mother's tree had stood. As she gently patted the soil around the young roots, Sarah felt no bitterness, only a profound sense of peace. The first tree had been a gift of love from her mother. The second was a gift of strength from herself. It was a tangible symbol of how she had turned a bitter harvest into a sweet triumph. She had not only honored her mother's memory, but had created her own legacy. The new blossom, in its small and silent way, was the final word in her story, a testament to the fact that kindness and courage, much like the fragrance of a lemon tree, would always linger long after the poison had faded away.